Hi everyone and welcome along to the Watercolour Quick Fix. Now at the end of last year we put a call out in our Watercolour Quick Fix clinic, it's quite a mouthful, to ask you what you are struggling with in your watercolour painting. So from now on, every Friday we will be tackling those one request at a time. But today we're going to start with one of the most requested subjects, was how on earth do I paint those perfect circles that was on the title card of the clinic. So grab your paints and let's get started. So this was the painting I was doing when we were chatting last year in the Watercolour Quick Fix clinic, when I was asking you for your questions, and a number of you said, how do you paint perfect circles? Well, the first thing I want to show you is these are not perfect circles. Okay, there are some that are pretty good, but then ones like that, if you actually look at it, it's a little bit more oval, but ultimately they're pretty close. And I think that's the first thing you need to remind yourself of, is painting a 100% perfect circle completely freehand is rather unlikely. But there are ways in which we can do a pretty good job and make our life as easy as possible. So the first thing to do is to get yourself a I always say rounded point, I mean pointed round brush that is something between a 4 or an 8. Size 6 is great as well. Ultimately, you want a brush that's got quite a thick amount of bristles, which just means when you are sweeping round that it covers quite a lot of area on the page and you're not having to sort of be colouring in your circles. Because the other thing about these circles is they've got a nice full coverage as well. There's not a lot of brush strokes in there, so we're going to look at that as well as the shape itself. So I'm going to use permanent rose. So I'm using my size 8 brush here, pointed round. I'm getting the whole sort of length of the bristles coated in the paint. So the first thing to do is the angle at which I hold the brush. For a lot of painting, we hold the brush on a nice sort of diagonal, almost to the page, almost like sort of 45 degrees, I suppose, which is fine for a lot of things. But for painting circles, actually, you want your brush to be as vertical as you can comfortably have it, because that means when you're painting the circle around like this, your bristles are pretty much applying the same angle, same amount of pressure as we go. So let's just compare. So a circle from above, there's a little bit of drag around the bottom, but there's a far less difference. Say if I'm like this, I'm really gonna struggle. Okay, because we're gonna catch the base of the brush, so keep your brush nice and vertical. Okay, the next tip is not to panic if you don't get your perfect circle first time. You may think that looks great, but actually when we look closely at it, it is nowhere near a very even circle. And so the way we do it is to keep it as a sort of continual motion. So coming from above, we've got that nice even motion with the circle. I take my brush off, but actually what I can do is I can keep going and just even it out where I want it to be evened out. And then I can just keep it going, and then just with my large brush I can get it nicely filled in. So that, ladies and gents, is how we paint good circles. We have a nice high angled vertical brush. We don't expect to get the perfect circle the first go. We can go back in, just edge it out here and there, and then nicely and quickly, with as few brush strokes as possible, paint it over. I think the other thing to say is the more you do, the better you will get, the more confidence you will build. And let's face it, it's all about feeling relaxed, isn't it? I think the only other helpful thing I can say is make sure your paint is nice and wet in the palette and your brush is nice and wet as well. What you don't want to be doing is getting you see that how that paint is so dry compared to this, trying to get really thick dry paint on your brush and scraping it round. That will mean you're there for far longer, doing far more brush strokes. So thanks so much for watching, and I cannot wait to work through the rest of your Quick Fix Clinic questions in the coming weeks.